You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King. I'm so excited to be speaking to Laura from High Life North. I can't believe that, this is a really cool moment for me because we met once upon a time at a networking event. So
before the magazine had even started.
Yeah, and it was a big dream. And I didn't really understand, I think, your vision at the time either. And to watch High Life North grow and see what you've created, I'm so excited for you. So,
thank you. Yeah, you met me when I had a seed of an idea. So you're probably one of the very few that have seen the entire journey, which is exciting.
Yeah. So when we first met, and I mean, for anyone interested who doesn't know you yet, please feel free to share whatever you want to about yourself. But when we first met, you'd relocated from working down south and sort of come back to the northeast.
Yeah, so it was across in the northwest that I was working mainly.
Right,
so yes. I worked in marketing and comms for a big volume house builder. And before that, I'd been in PR agencies. I'd worked in a law firm for a little while and had this idea about setting up a magazine, actually from a few digital magazines that I'd seen down in London. And I thought, they're really cool. And I loved all of the content, but it was very London focused, of things to do on a weekend and really expensive fashion. And I was just like, there's something here that women in the Northeast would like, and I think that I can do it. So when I first met you, it was before we even had a website. So I was starting to think about that and what platform to build it on and things. And I had this grand plan of doing a daily email, which now that I know how much work goes into 2 emails, that would be impossible. But you only really learn those things from starting it. And then now, 3 years later, it is what it is today, which is really good.
It is. It's really good. And it's an amazing magazine, but it gives voices to so many women and, stories and voices to artists and creatives locally and to restaurants. And you've got gorgeous fashion in there. I love the editor's list, which is always my favorite. I'm pretty sure that's your list most of the time.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you've got that mix of the glamour and the list stuff that we would love to have, but also high street finds and favorite items and artists you've never heard of and musicians that people should know about. And I love it. I think it's providing a really cool, piece of content that women and many readers are accessing all the time. So yeah, what kind of feedback have you had since starting the magazine?
I suppose the best feedback is subscribers, because people are actually giving you their email address, which people aren't wanting to hand out as much anymore, to receive our email twice a week, which is great. And then we do have an incredibly low unsubscribe rate and also really high open and click-through rates as well, which for me, it shows that it's community building and really building that up. And then all of our kind of social followers and direct traffic as well from people who are just searching for something, stumble across us and then subscribe. So feedback wise, we ran a reader survey last October. It was actually a focus group where we got our readers together and gave them wine and sandwiches and then picked their brains on all kinds of things. And they kind of basically said that what they like is the things to do. So finding the hidden gems in the region. And also I think something that you said before about it's a platform where you don't necessarily have to be this incredibly successful CEO to be in it. You can be starting out in the music industry or have an art collection that is shown in a really small hidden nook in Newcastle, or you might be retired and you've written your first book. And it's those kind of stories that are relatable to the everyday person. I think there's something in the Northeast which is fantastic, and I know you're part of it as well, which is the kind of business community, which is great. But the way that we think about it, our audience could be nurses or work on the high street or anything, and it's speaking to all of those women as well.
I agree, and I think we can tend to focus around our networking groups that we naturally go to. So whether that's a charity we're involved in or your husband's golf club or whatever it might be related to, an activity that you do. So to actually have something that you can access and learn about different things. And I have to admit, you know, you're absolutely right about finding out what's going on in the city. I mean, so during the pandemic, I mean, I know you set up as well very shortly before the pandemic, but that was really powerful for me because I remember at the time, a lot of people I was working with who, like me, were very involved in events, and they were creatives and they were musicians or artists or cultural programmers. So they were creating content and creating festivals and all kinds of things. But actually seeing some of the stories that you shared during lockdown of people's stories and what they were doing. So one that really spoke to me was Layla Darrenville. So she, you know, a cultural, she's so immersed in so many different things, but you know, Northern Roots and Jumping Hop Club and different things that she's created this freelancer community, Northeast, where, you know, rather than sit and feel sad about not having any projects to work on or lack of funding, she's actually collected people together and created this community where people can ask for help and share resources. And so hearing stories like that, although I already knew of her, I got to see a different perspective. And I think there's that mix of women of stories that you share. So it could be an academic who's written a paper about something that's really interesting, but it could also be a favorite recipe, somebody's journey, you know, and I just love it. I think it's great.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really funny because like recipes, for example, they can perform really well for us if we have one that just, there was like a potato massaman curry recently that absolutely flew on the click-through rates. And then we try and talk about, you know, things like menopause and periods and more gritty things that I suppose people don't want to talk about as much, mental health, and try and be really challenging there. And then have fashion, and then have where to go at the weekend. So we try really hard to make it a one-stop shop so that anyone going on it could find something that would interest them.
Absolutely. So from the outside in, what I've admired watching is not only your ability to execute this to a really professional, high quality, you know, magazine online, but you've also built a team, you know, and so you're paying your team. And I mean, this is incredible that you've got this thing that people are accessing, they're loving, they're subscribing, they're clicking through, but you're also able to, you know, have a team who work on this. And I think for many business owners, you know, starting a business is tricky, but the fact that you've been able to build this thing that you've monetized from the outset in, I mean, that is amazing. So, I mean, how do you fund this? So I know there'll be people who are listening who are readers, who are maybe nurses or in different roles, but from a business point of view, like how did you get going?
Well, made it up as I went along. So I've never actually worked in publishing before.
Right.
And I love speaking to people now who work in publishing because I'm like, tell me how you normally do this, because we really literally made it up as we went. But essentially, it's all about the audience. So you build an audience and then you can almost, it sounds a bit cutthroat, but sell that audience because then an advertiser wants to speak to them. And we try and do that in a very, I suppose, like advanced way that puts the reader first, but benefits the advertiser as well. So it's win-win. Because obviously, like you said, we need revenue to survive, can't be a charity, unfortunately. And to kind of churn out the product that we do to such a high volume every week as well, we need a team to do that. So first 6 months was build up the audience, because I could never go to an advertiser and be like, 10 people looked at the magazine last week, do you want to pay? So I did that on my own at my kitchen table for a while. And then Rosie came on board, and she had worked in publishing and advertising sales before. And she was like, she loved the magazine and was like, I really want to work for you. I think I can do it. And I was like, oh yeah, let's try and monetize it. And she made, I'll not say what it was, but it was a really decent amount in the first month. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, people are actually prepared to pay for that, to put it in front of our readers. So then we started thinking, we don't want our readers to feel like they're being sold to, and we need to make it so that they are enjoying the content and it's really relevant for them. So we came up with this audience first approach where we always think we know our readers, so how do they want it to be written, and how do they want to read it, and are they normally on a mobile, or how long do they normally spend on a page, and all of that kind of thing. So our writers are now trained in that, and then we push that back to the advertiser and say, this is what we know will work. And we try and be really creative as well. My background's obviously in marketing, so instead of the advertiser saying like, for example, I've got this new product that I want to sell, we'll try and say, okay, so let's get a range of women who can maybe test the product, or who can give a review of the product, or we could create a quiz to make people go through it and get their email address and all of that kind of thing, just to try and make it more exciting and interesting for the reader and more valuable for the advertiser. And that's our sweet spot of revenue, basically, because we probably could make more. I was actually looking at programmatic display yesterday, because the Sun has just went across to the US and they have programmatic and they've been really profitable from it.
Okay.
But I personally don't want our readers to go on feeling like they've got banners everywhere, and it doesn't fit with what our values are, I suppose. So yeah, we're just going to go kind of advertorial only for now.
Yeah, I love that. What I see from the outside in, and what I really personally value about the magazine, is it's a curated collection of experiences. So whether it's learning about style, or reading someone's profile, or just looking at ideas for gifts, or you often do write about local businesses in the northeast of England, so there is that desire to support local. There's a lot of stuff around environmental stuff, and so I love it. I think there's a real beautiful product there. But as you say, when you read it first, yes, they know you have to put the lights on, you have to pay your team. At the same time, you're not going to put somebody who isn't aligned with your values and the magazine's values in the magazine. So that's really important too.
Yeah, I hope that I think that our readers realise, that we have to do it in the first place, but that we put so much effort into making it just as interesting as the editorial content. And the other side of that, I suppose, is that we have to have the balance. So it's kind of 80-20 or 60-40, depending on how much we've got on. Editorial integrity mainly, and then the ads on top of it. So we would never have an entire email that's just full of adverts. We have to have that organic content as well.
But also, as you said, when you're working with advertisers, you wouldn't just go, right, here's a big piece that we've pushed out about whatever product. It's, I tried it, or these different women tried it, this was their experience, this is what they loved, this is what they didn't like, and that's really nice, because you get to hear people's true stories and experiences.
Yeah, and that's what everybody, especially now, like, they love that whole storytelling element of anything, don't they? And so to even just niche down on something that a business might think is, I don't know, probably not massively important, but we know that our readers will be particularly interested in that, to be able to push that out and highlight it for them, and also give them some fresh eyes into their business as well, without them having to necessarily engage a marketing company to do that for them as a campaign.
There's so many things you've said that I want to come back to. One of the things already you mentioned about Rosie and her advertising experience and her background. So it's interesting, isn't it? When we start a business, sometimes we don't always see the product through other people's eyes. So she loved the product, she got on board with you, but she was also able to really contribute towards the monetization of that. And it's a good example of how when someone else takes that step of selling for us, it's a lot easier, because they don't have the fear around the sales, or
100%. I'm not a natural salesperson by any stretch of the imagination, so unless I put a really good advertising sales team in place, it would never be what it is becoming right now. I just want to give everyone everything for free all the time, so I just don't have that distance enough from it, and I don't have natural sales ability, so those two things combined just wouldn't work. So we've got Rosie, and then she brought in Molly as well, and they really complement each other, because so Molly, for example, is really into hospitality. She worked in hospitality for years, so she understands that whole marketing element of that, arts and culture, beauty and fashion. And then Rosie is very much a huge champion for shopping local and sort of the travel clients and staycations and all of that kind of thing. So they complement each other really well as well.
I love that. It's great. So thinking about this magazine when you were first planning it, so I've been obviously following your journey, but also Laura Bartlett, so who writes House of Cocoa. And, you know, I like Laura, and I went down to Leeds and I saw her for International Women's Day, and it was a really fun time. But one of the things that I was interested in is she started out like a blog and then went into a occasional printed copy that you can now buy in stores. Yeah. And I have actually purchased one of those before, or I've, you know, had some of the paper copy ones. And I wondered, so is there in the future any scope for you to do something printed, or was it always a digital thing?
Always digital. Always. I mean, lots of different reasons, sustainability reasons, because we really do care about that. And it would break my heart to see magazines come back from anywhere and pulped or in bin. Like, I couldn't handle seeing that, and I just don't think it's right. Also, digital is the future, in my opinion. And I like to have the control over that, and I want to know who has opened the emails and how many people have been on the website and how something has performed, and be able to tweak those knobs for advertisers necessarily to get it out on a Facebook ad, for example, to get it in front of more people. So I just like the whole control of that. And I do think there's a place for print. I don't diss print, but it's not for me, not for us.
I love that you're really clear on your goals and your boundaries around what will work and what won't. So I love to buy paper magazines because I have this habit of making collages. So I like to make a vision board of all the places.
I do that as well. I love that.
All the places I want to go, and like all the goals I have, and the beautiful pictures, and like the Dior or Chanel or whatever it is that I don't own anything like that, but one day, you know. And so I love to do that, but you're right, there are elements of that I would put in the bin or recycle. So you're saving so much, you know, and that's one of the reasons I love podcasting. So people often say to me, oh, you know, why do you like podcasting? How did you get into it? And I love marketing, and I always have. And you can do so much on social media, whether it's paid or organic, you know, just reaching people. But what I like about a podcast is you can share so much real valuable content and stories without any complex, you know, flyers and all these things that we buy because it's how it's always been done. It's one of the reasons why I would love to make some merchandise, but until I've decided what I want to do, and it would be very limited edition, small print runs, because the idea of stock just sitting somewhere that you can't use.
You don't want to waste that. I mean, even things like the cost of paper and the cost of producing things like that, when you're a small business, you have to watch everything, don't you? And so, I mean, for our overheads, even to not have to pay out for print costs and paper really massively reduces our overheads.
This is a really important point around the changing nature of media and journalism, because you put something out, and often I found this, you know, there's a lot of big organizations, you know, huge news sites that we go on. I'm trying to think of an example specifically. I mean, I'm talking even from Financial Times to some of the others. Sometimes you're in such a rush to get the story that it can be filled with typos, or it can be, you know, it's not always the most well written, because it's absolutely. And this is it. And it's just like, we got the scoop, or, you know, and actually that's why I love High Life North, because the attention to detail and the editorial content and the flair, the creativity in it is beautiful. It feels like you're reading something that's poetic in a way sometimes. So you go on a journey with the person who's been to a new hotel or spa, and so you get to experience it through their eyes, and that's what's nice. But it's very different to some of the other media that you see.
We have quite a unique tone of voice, which Becky and Rachel have really built up over the past year particularly, but since we started really, where it's a lot more friendly, and we'll use a little bit of slang in there just as people would normally read it, and try and keep it really brief as well. So we know that most people look at it on their phones, so they don't want to be scrolling forever. We try and give them the information as quickly as possible, but in an interesting way, so it's not just really bland.
I'm really excited about it. And I would like to ask you, so we've spoken about this offline on other occasions, but so it feels very different to anything else in the Northeast in the media space. So we have got, you know, we've got traditional methods, like we've got things like Northern Insight, we've got the Chamber of Commerce, we've got the Crack magazine, which is for creatives and music industries. You know, that there are lots of resources, and a lot of those, as we said, are printed. So you might come across someone you've never met, looking and reading through and seeing articles, paper, but again, there's that sustainability element. But also what you've done is quite different, because some of the people and the stories you feature aren't always about the Northeast. So actually it could be an artist in a different part of the world, or you know, a social matter that people haven't thought about, and that feels quite unusual, I think, to what else is going on in the northeast of England at the moment. So would you say that that has been something you've picked up, you know, as you've been reading yourself and consuming content elsewhere? You mentioned you liked some of the stuff you were accessing in London. Is it a global thing where you've picked up things you liked from other areas? You know, how did your content creation or curation journey develop?
Good question. I think the two parts to it. One part is that in terms of what that content is, I think everybody, you know, will shop a little bit on the high street and try and shop local as much as possible. They'll have global issues that they're really interested in and people that they want to hear about locally. So it's a bit unrealistic to have something, if you're trying to be genuine about it, that is like you would only shop locally from these brands, or you would only care about these northeast shops and businesses and people. Nobody is like that now, and especially with digital and especially with social media, the world has become a very small place. So we really, you know, there's a team of 6 of us, and we've all got quite different interests and backgrounds and things that we like and dislike. So we kind of pull that all together. So it is, I suppose, a bit of a melting pot of just things that we think people will be interested in. We've got something coming out soon, which is business owners who've survived recessions in the past and their advice and their tips for business owners who haven't been through that before. So there's all of that. I had a second part of the answer to that and I can't remember what it was now. Oh yeah, so I do a lot of research, so I'm very curious, and I like to see what other publications are doing and look at that. And actually the Northeast, as usual, it's not unexpected, but it is quite far behind in terms of everything else that's happening in America, for example, and London is starting to become more digitally aware and put a lot more focus on that. So the Sunday Times, for example, is putting a huge amount of focus on its digital offering now. And I suppose it's just looking at all of that and recognizing that that will come to the Northeast eventually, and to try and be at the forefront of that as much as possible.
I think there's been a emerging tech and creative scene that's so exciting in the Northeast for quite some time, but so there's been so much money and investment put into areas of the North, such as Teesside, you know, and parts of the Northeast. And it's exciting to watch that develop. But you are right, there is something different about, say, the States in fast-paced places like California or New York, or if you look at London, you know, because there is very much an efficiency focus. It's a first world country, but things get fixed, they get done. You know, they're very
huge
much
investment as well.
Yeah, absolutely, huge investment. And so a lot of things maybe move forward quite quickly. And I do think, although there's been a lot of investment recently, I'm not sure that there's always been that in the past. So actually watching some of these things develop, and also the speed of knowledge through phones now, and, you know, how we can share information. So I really love that. I mean, so you've got a team of 6 now. So do you have an office or do you work from home?
No, we did have an office, and that was actually important for us to bond and start, like, figure out all of our processes and work together. But when lockdown properly started to lift, and I suppose only about 6 months ago, we were out and about all of the time. And for us to be getting content, that's really important. For us to be seeing our clients, or just going out in general in the Northeast and getting pictures and stuff. It was quite a big office, and again, overhead cutting. I always meticulously go through our spreadsheet every month being like, was that worth it? Was that worth it? Was that worth it? And the office just didn't feel worth it anymore. So we moved to a working from home model, and it's done really, really well, actually. So I think the girls are happy, which they seem happy. We all have a better work-life balance now. So you know, can take the dog out for an hour in the middle of the day or go out for lunch, but then work an extra hour at night. And there's definitely no element of micromanaging as long as the sales team hits their target, the magazine is filed on time and it goes out on time. Like, they're the only things that need to happen.
But also, by not having an office, so I've learned this lesson, and it's quite a tricky one that I've been through in the last year, is you've got to not just think about having the overheads of a space, but it's also remembering to buy tea and coffee and bin bags and all the chores that come not only with your own home that you need to do chores, but also that space. And then if you've got guests coming in, you need to make sure it's nice and all these things. So you're immediately cutting out so much work that doesn't need to be done necessarily, but also because you're digital only, you're not worrying about layout as much. So for instance, you know, you can write a blog and it's on the website and it might showcase on mobile or the website in a particular way, but we know that if you've ever been involved in writing a magazine, for anyone listening, you know, all of the work that goes into the layout and
huge.
You know, that can be like so and so gets this page on page 3 of the magazine or whatever. It can take a lot of time and so you're saving so much energy and time with all of that.
And the commute, it was a really big one. You know, we're in Gosforth, so everyone was stuck in traffic every morning. You don't arrive in the best frame of mind. You worried about being 5 minutes late. Even when you have that afternoon slump and you kind of sat there, it was much better to just go on your own sofa and have a cup of tea or ring your friend or something instead of having to sit and power through it. I wouldn't want anyone working for me where they're like waiting for 5 o'clock to hit. I hate that. So it's changed all of that kind of culture of it, which is great. And efficiency wise, they all communicate so well with each other. So we've got a WhatsApp group, email, send preview links, have the Asana, which we use to plan everything out. It, touch wood, is a pretty well-oiled machine and it just kind of runs.
I'm absolutely inspired by how you've developed and executed this.
I don't know if I did it.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to explain to someone else how you've done something. So you've mentioned work-life balance and you've mentioned how actually giving up the premises maybe has given a little bit of that back, being able to walk the dog, go for, you know, lunch and things like that. Can you tell me and listeners or viewers a little bit about work-life balance, what it means to you?
Well, I do feel really, really fortunate to have what I would consider a good work-life balance now. Very rarely, once a month at most, set an alarm in the morning. I just don't need often to be up before, say, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm generally up before then. But to even just have that freedom of going to bed and not having to set an alarm in the morning, not thinking I need to get there on time, is really, really good for my mental health and my feeling of happiness. And then mine is probably a little bit different to the team's because it does take over my life quite a lot. So I'll very often work on Saturdays and Sundays, but then maybe have work on a Monday morning, have the afternoon off and go and see my friend who's just had a baby or something like that. So I suppose freedom for me is happiness, and so being digital only gives me freedom, and the working conditions, if you like, that we've set up gives me freedom. So that's how I like to live my life.
And potentially you could work anywhere in the world.
Literally anywhere. So could the team. Like, I would more than encourage them if they wanted to go anywhere. Like I said, as long as their part of work gets done, I really don't care where they are or how they do it or how long it takes them even.
So as the content develops then, you've got this Northeast Women's Magazine. I mean, I bet you have readers from all over the country and perhaps even globally as well.
Yeah, I always find the global ones interesting because I think, are you really that interested in this content? But I think the global readers, there's not tons and tons of them, are probably people who have moved to Australia, for example, and are like wanting to keep in touch with the Northeast, or they maybe were a subscriber and then they moved to Australia, something like that.
Right.
We do have quite a lot of people from London, but then I don't know sometimes if servers kind of just route people naturally through London and we don't actually know where they are.
Yeah.
The bread and butter at the moment is very much Newcastle and surrounding areas. Right. We're into Sunderland a lot more now and Durham a lot more now. The plan is to move right down and take Middlesbrough, strongly. I try and strongly, and then up to the Scottish borders. And then the long-term plan after that is all of the north. So
Manchester and Leeds.
Manchester, yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing, and I can see it happening. I mean, Manchester's a beautiful space, and if you could say like, oh, we went here, or even for the magazine now, like, oh, I popped over to Leeds for the weekend and this is what I did, or you know, all these things.
But so even all of the you know, like the towns and villages that are in those areas that are surrounded there, there's so many great local businesses, great restaurants, great everything. And I do feel, I was going to say no, but I feel very strongly that the people in that area would want to do that and to have that platform for women and female-owned businesses to shout about. So the demand is there, I'm sure.
So when you were planning this magazine, why did you decide to only do it for women? Was that always a thing from the outset?
Good question. I felt it was really important to have a niche. So for me, even just from a marketing background, I thought a niche was really important. And another factor in it was that I love business. I've always really liked business, and I love lifestyle. And I didn't want two different magazines to have to look at those. So I wanted something that was all in one place. So that's where the concept of the one-stop shop element came up of it, where you could literally get career advice and then be like, book here for the weekend, and then like, oh, do you struggle with heavy periods, and do you want to look nice in this dress, and just have all of that stuff in one. Because the women thing is interesting, because especially in the society that we live in now, it's obviously very much more around equality and not having, you know, if there was a men's only magazine or a women's only magazine. And I still do think that there are specific issues that only women face, and therefore I'm still really proud to provide a platform that really showcases that and gives women in particular that platform, I suppose. But that's not to say we do have quite a lot of male readers, quite a lot of male social media followers. So it's not like we're like, oh, we hate men, we're just for women, stay out. It's about celebrating the women in the Northeast, is I suppose how I would promote it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I think it's important that we do have spaces that we spend time learning about things that matter to us and have the space for our voice. And I think we've spoken about this again before, but it's things like that there's so much work around inclusion, which is really important, but there are also alternatives for men, for instance, for GQ or you know, there's men's health or different things,
or even if you're like really into photography, or that everyone has niche particular interests. And so our content, I suppose specifically around the health content, is very much focused on menopause, periods, like mental health issues, relationships that are more giving advice from the female side.
Absolutely.
And so men can read it if they want to, but we're just being upfront to say a lot of this content is going to be aimed at a female audience.
It's really interesting to me, your approach, because I feel like in so many ways, with everything you talked about, especially your leadership style, how you've built the team, there's so much evidence of how you've been so grounded and you've had this clarity in your decision making, which is very different to the way my brain works. But how do you stay so grounded? What are your kind of routines or things that are your non-negotiables?
I think I've always been quite a calm person. You know, sometimes in jobs they make you do those colour charts, and you're like, blue is really organised and yellow is happy and red is like
go.
Or like anger and like authority. And mine is really low. My red is like, it's very, very difficult to get me angry. I don't think I ever get angry. I can't even think of a time. So my approach generally is just pretty laid back, which I think has helped, especially in like starting a new business. Obviously you can have stuff thrown at you all the time, and instead of panicking or getting angry, I'm just like, oh, it'll be okay, it'll work out. So I suppose there's a bit of an inner knowing there. Mentors in my life and like good close friends who I can talk to about business. That's why I do strongly believe that the business networks we're part of are very useful, because we know there's 10 people that we could send a DM to on LinkedIn who would just listen to something that we have. So a really supportive network is really important. Meditation, I love that. Do it all the time, probably more than I should. But I really nailed that over lockdown. And now that I've really nailed it and really see the benefits from it, I couldn't not do it. I try and do it every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. So I do that, do a little bit before bed, a little bit in the morning before I wake up, instead of looking at my phone or anything like that. And I suppose, become, not to go like very woo-woo, but more in touch with my like spiritual side has really helped me to have perspective and like confidence, I suppose, in what I'm doing in the future.
Absolutely. I love that. And I like hearing different people's coping strategies or mechanisms for success. And I just am really inspired by what you've achieved and how you've done that, how the team you've built around you. It reminds me of a book that I've been reading. I always talk about it, but it's called Profit First by Mike. I don't know how you say his name. Mikhailovich. I've really butchered his name. I'm sorry, Mike. But I mean, it's a great book. But what it talks about in there is the route from A to B is often quicker than the route that many entrepreneurs take. So it talks about, the cash-eating monster of a business and how it just needs feeding all the time. One of the mistakes I've made is, one of my biggest goals is my online podcasting course. I want to get that up. I want to get it sold because I've got great content and people ask me for it all the time.
Yeah.
However, it's the time to create it, right? So we've got great resources, but it's the time to do it. So if something else comes in, or I do something else, or I get asked to speak at this or write this or whatever, I'll say yes to that because it brings in some cash. But then that actually takes you on the squiggly, whirly line away from where you want to go.
Yeah.
What I admire with you, Laura, is you've gone from A to B with your goal. And I'm sure there's been squiggles and bums. But I just mean that, not only are you it's not like you're writing a magazine just for you in your echo chamber. By having different voices and different, creators who have different interests, you've actually got different archetypes you're appealing to. So it's got a much better, reach, but it's also so much more valuable and nuanced a perspective than just yours. And it's beautiful.
And that's why it was always important that we promote ourselves as a magazine, a publication, and not a blog, because a blog is very much normally just one person pushing their views out, and ours, we try and have a really good spread of age of writers. So we've got our current team, but we do use freelancers as well to make sure that we get all of those topics covered from the right perspectives. And then obviously the stories, we feature people from all walks of life, and they can tell it in their way, and we just let them, give them the opportunity to do that.
I love that.
But just to go back to your A to B squiggles, there have been squiggles, obviously, just like absolutely anybody. It's just, I suppose, learning the lesson quickly and moving on.
Yeah, failing fast and having the courage to try things and iterate and adjust, and but I love that. And I think being grounded and meditating and all those things that you do to cope are all really great in making sure that you're prepared for the next thing that goes a bit wonky.
Not panicking, isn't it? It's if you're not in a panicked state or a rushed state.
So what's next for High Life North? I mean, you've already grown this amazing thing, and you're doing so much at the moment. You're doing sponsoring of awards and going to events and sponsoring them. And what's your goal? What's your dream for the future? What do you want to do with this space?
So we've got a strategy for next year, which is actually kind of layering upon what we've already done. So audience first approach, 110%. So really, really, really focusing on that. Speaking to our readers more and finding out exactly what kind of things that they're wanting to do. Offline events is a really big one for us, because everyone is asking us for more events. So it's that thing about, it's the community building and bringing like-minded people together. So we're planning on doing quite a wide range, from gin tasting to yoga retreats or yoga days and wellness things, just to make sure that we've got those pockets of places that people can come together if they want to. We get a lot of people that come to things on their own, which I think is really nice, because they obviously see that our team is friendly and we're approachable, and we always say, come on your own if you want to meet new people and make new friends. So to be able to do that is really nice. And then data-led approach, making sure that we have our reporting absolutely nailed, that we have our systems and processes absolutely nailed, ready, I suppose, preparing for that next stage of growth.
Exciting.
Which sounds a bit boring as what's in the next year, like just steady Eddie, but that is kind of the plan.
But that's how people succeed. And I think having, steps, sometimes following the steps through one by one, even when they go squiggly, having that strategy and knowing where you're going is part of the journey. So
and we want to be here. Sometimes people ask, are you planning to sell it, or are you planning to do this? But I really am not. I just want High Life North to exist until I'm 60, and then
but I just think sometimes when you have a dream and then you're like, whoa, that dream's real and it's happened, and what do I do now? I mean, it's just amazing to me. Just from our first conversation, I'm so excited. So well done. I'd love to know, what is your number one word to nurture your zest? So meditate. That's the thing that keeps you sane and calm and just grounded. And
I love it. Couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Do you have any top tips for anyone who wants to meditate?
So I personally don't love, I know a lot of people do like them, the Headspace and the Calm apps and things, but personally I would recommend just putting the lights down, lighting a candle, lie on your back, close your eyes and just think of nothing, and just really work at thinking of nothing, even if it takes a really long time and you have to practice it night after night. Once you nail that, I think you can get so much greater control over your thoughts and your emotions, and almost tidy your brain up so it's nice and tidy all of the time and you know what you're doing. I couldn't recommend it enough.
I like what you said earlier, is that it's like a filing cabinet, so it's like having a little organize and a sort, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest, as well as our website and YouTube channel. If you've liked our episode today, please give us a follow or leave a review or any comments. We love reading these. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.